So we're going to go over kind of organization of a drive team, why individuals are selected for each role. Um, we're going to go over general practices that you would take as a mentor coach, actual driving practice a little bit if we have time. Um, Organization, selection process, practices. Okay. Next slide. In organization, we're going to go over yearly cycles, factors in A team, B team, and students that would be in training to be a driver. All right, so yearly cycles. This is something that I've kind of started to put in place with our team. One of the main factors that goes into selecting drivers is a level of experience. It's super important to have somebody that's used to being out on the field and knowing what's going on out there. It can get crazy out there. If anybody's been a driver before, they know how that goes. It's insane. So we like to keep members that have experience on the drive team as long as possible. So we try to rotate out students with as much experience as possible every year, right? So we'll have like a senior graduating 1 year and a freshman replacing them, or a freshman in training and then replacing them the following year as a sophomore. That's just one of the retaining experience on a team. So it's kind of an ideal cycle. Like I was saying, you got a senior driving 1 year. They're graduating the next year, but the junior is the operator. Sorry, I didn't practice this part. Graph is weird. So quick.
Oh no.
So we got 18 students, senior, junior, sophomore, freshman, right? The freshman is in training as a driver to replace the senior who's a driver. So they're going to move up to the A team the next year as a sophomore. Same thing applies to the operator, the coach, etc. And you want to kind of have a flow going with that. Senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. That's in your thing. You can look at it. So A team. A team is like the varsity on a football team, right? They're the ones that have the most experience. They're the best drivers, and they're the primary people. They're out there competing during all the normal matches. A teams usually consist of a driver, an operator, coach, and a human player. The driver is the one that's driving like the base of the robot. Typically just the wheels. They might have some other functions in there. The operator is the one that will usually be doing kind of an upper structure or just extra functions on the robot, whatever the game requires that year. The coach, that's the one, the student or the mentor, depending on the team, who is standing behind them, kind of making strategy adjustments on the fly. Noticing that there's a dead robot on the other side of the field. Well, now we need to go over there. Or this team has, 3 cubes on the scale over there. We need to start loading up the scale or the switch, whatever, if anybody knows power up. Human player, that's just somebody that's feeding game pieces into the field. That can really be anybody, but sometimes it requires another level of rules, knowledge, and strategy. For example, 2018, that took a little bit more because you had to know what power-ups to use at different times in the match. There was a boost where you could double the amount of points you would get, and you could force it from the other team, stuff like that. It just kind of depends on the year, but typically it's just somebody that's feeding game pieces. The B team, that is something we like to try and keep around with our team, a group of backup drivers. This position also acts as the in-training position. That is where we have the freshmen or the sophomores that are coming up. that we want to replace the A-team members when they graduate. But in the case where we have, sophomores or juniors driving, they're just backup drivers that are, we test them out, but they're not up to A-team level, but they're good, so they can have a little experience during practice. Just people that are ready to go in case an A-team member gets sick, they start failing classes, or they just really start to drive poorly. It happens. People get bad out of nowhere. Doesn't happen often, but it happens.
You okay? You good?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Like I said, this can include the in-training positions for upcoming A-team members. The in-training, like I was saying, it's the freshmen and sophomores who are replace the A-team. They practice a little bit more than maybe the A-team will, because we're trying to get them used to what's going on. Obviously, if the A-team isn't doing well enough yet, put them in more, but B-team needs to start learning what's going on. The goal is to learn as much as possible while you're in training. All right, so the selection process. I'm going to go through ideal qualities and the testing. So, different positions have different ideal qualities for what you want that position. So all members, they need to have experience, dedication, communication, and the knowledge of the rules and strategy. Don't go farther. Experience, we talked about that multiple times already. Dedication, that can be a number of different things. How much you're willing to jump in and work on the robot even if you don't know what's happening. How many meetings, team functions, fundraising events you're attending. Communication, that's obviously just being able to talk to your teammates, figure out what they're saying, just work with what they're telling you. Knowledge of the rules, the strategy, robot, that's all pretty straightforward. All right, moving on. The coach, right? They need to have a strong form of leadership, right? So some people just naturally have a sense of leadership. Some people don't. That can be determined in a lot of different ways. Just how they work with others. If they're taking a strategy of, or taking an approach of, let's do this. Let's work together to get this this task accomplished. That's a leader. Somebody that's saying, hey, you go do this. That's not a leader. That's a boss. And you don't want that in the workplace, in driving a robot, anywhere. Communication, you have to be able to say, hey, we need to get this done. We need to do this. You need to be able to speak up. Adaptability, you need to see what's going on in the field and make changes quickly. That's another part of leadership, part of something you just have. And then knowledge of rules. Everybody needs to have that, but they really need to know in depth the level of penalties, whether it's tech foul, regular foul, red cards, whatever. They really need to know more in depth than other people. The driver, they need to have a certain level of talent. That's kind of a given. You need to be able to drive the robot. They need to be able to follow directions. The coach, their operator, they're going to be yelling in their ear the entire time. Directives. Go here, go there. They don't need to be just tunnel vision, driving, not listening to what anybody else is saying. That doesn't help anybody. Rules knowledge. You have to know, not as much in depth as the coach, but you have to know, I can't go there, I can't go there, I can't hit another robot when our arm is out, whatever, stuff like that. The operator, communication is a big one here with the operator, right? They need to be able to be spotting game pieces or other robots in the field to help their driver out. Looking ahead on the field more so than looking at what's going on, right? By that I mean this robot's playing defense over here. Get ready to make a maneuver around him more so than there's game pieces there. That's something the coach should be worrying about. They need to have a certain level of talent, same as a driver. thinking ahead, and a little bit of leadership. They have to have a little bit of that natural, the same way the coach does, and then be able to follow directions the same way the driver does. Human player, that depends on the year, but mostly they just need to be somebody that's focused, right? Because I've seen it time and time again. There have been human players out in the field that there's a robot on their alliance that's coming up to try and get a game piece, but they're just looking at their own robot and they're just oblivious to what's happening. I've seen our drivers just ramming into the wall constantly, and the human players just, oh. So they need to be focused and see what's going on all around, not just their own robot. Communication. This one is a little bit weird with the human player because sometimes you're right next to your driver, so you can just yell at each other, but sometimes you're across the field, so you need to be able to understand hand signals. You're allowed to have like signs, whatever. I know in 2011 there was like 3 game pieces. We'd hold up, we need a triangle. That the coach would hold up, we need a triangle, we need a circle, whatever. You have to know the rules because you can't stick your hand in the thing. I've seen plenty of human players get penalties from reaching too far or putting too many game pieces in a robot. All right, so testing process. This is part of the selection process. Observation. So that's going to be the first step in drive team selection. So first you want to observe like the non-quantitative factors. So the stuff that's not something you can put down numerically, right? You can't get specific data. Experience, dedication, social skills, stuff like that. Next up would be a rules test. So we get the rules today. I'm going to go through and get a list of everything that the drivers and coaches really need to know. And throughout the week, I'm going to make a rules test, right? So that's given to everybody that wants to apply to drive team. So even though A team is pretty much locked in, they're still given the rules because I need to make sure that they know it. They need to be reading it throughout this first week. It's just a basic test, more so on how the game is played, what are the field elements, what penalties can occur, stuff like that. They don't really need to know in depth yet what the penalties given for those fouls are. As long as you know not to do it, it won't matter what level of penalty it is. Just don't do it. So after that, we get on to the driver's test. It's given to the driver and the operator. It's kind of a set of basic drills, obstacle courses. It tests, their ability to handle the robot in different situations. Obstacle courses, time trials. We'll run through some of the drills that I'd like to do during practice sessions. And it could be any plethora of things that you feel is necessary. Anyways. Interviews. We give interviews to potential coaches, human players, if the year dictates it. One of the main things that we go through during the interviews is scenario-based situations. So if this happened, what would we do from that point? What is an ideal situation on the field? If we have 3 good robots, what would be the ideal strategy? What would you do if this happened? Basic scenarios. What are things that you think we should be scouting during the season, during the matches? Does this robot have a consistent manipulator, right? Are they consistently getting cargo into the ship, or are they throwing it out the side sometimes? Is it just bouncing off? And then some basic job interview questions, right? So we want to know, what do they think is their best quality? What's their worst quality? Relative experience. Are you in clubs where you get leadership? Are you in a job? Are you a Boy Scout? Are you a Girl Scout? So just stuff that you would get asked for a job interview. And then after that, you're going to go through and evaluate it, every candidate for every role, right? So you want to put a scale on all those factors, like a 1 to 10, 1 through 5, A to Z, whatever you want to put. Next. So rate all those applicants at that scale, per the role that they applied for, not just in general. Next thing you want to do is consider how your teammates may mesh together, right? So some people, they may be the best driver and the best operator, but they will not work together well. I've seen plenty of times just drivers and operators just yelling at each other back and forth all day, and they're both really good drivers, but they just don't work together. Some people may work together and be better together than the two best people. And then once you've got all that kind of put together, then you start building the best team that you possibly can from that point. All right, so season timeline. This is going to be kind of how you go through stuff throughout the season, right? It'll include build season, competition, etc. All right, so very early in the season, this is like today, or this week, right? You're going to start discussing strategy, making plans, going over scenarios, what your ideal situation is going to be on the field, 3 good robots, and things that can go wrong. One of the robots dies on the field. What are you going to do during that situation? You want to lay out your field routing, right? So sometimes you just want to go for one general path on the field. Obviously, that'll change during the game, but lay out how you want it to happen, generally. Just kind of go over it. At this point, or not this point, but a week or two from now, you should be able to have a pretty basic chassis, even if it's just a tank drive that just goes back and forth. You can start running drills, run the routes that you laid out, evasive maneuvers, defensive maneuvers, how to avoid other robots, just basic stuff to keep going over. Mid-season, ideally at this part you should have at least a direction of where you want to go with your manipulators, how you want to design them, so you can start putting makeshift stuff on that basic chassis. So like, we determined that last year a traffic cone could pick up a hatch, right? So we could have theoretically attached just a traffic cone to the front of the robot. That way the drivers get some practice just lining up, putting it on there. You can skip the video. So as we start getting towards the end of build season, hopefully, it doesn't always go this way, we all know that. Hopefully the robot's coming together. So you can start actually running legitimate driving practice. Start running match simulations, start timing it, see how many game pieces you can get through, see how many cycles you can run during a match. One thing I like to do a lot is just run cycles nonstop. Don't worry about match time, because one of the biggest things that any coach for any sport will tell you is repetition is the key to any sort of success, because you start building muscle memory, you start getting used to it. You want to have smooth, clean repetitions before you start going fast. If you start trying to go fast too early, you'll just be constantly making mistakes. So non-stop repetitions, start taking it slow. And after you've done just a ton of repetitions, run another match simulation, see if you've improved. Start adding interferences, start adding a dead teammate, a robot playing defense, stuff like that. Drills and practice. So these are just kind of some of the drills you can start doing. One of the ones I like to do is just have the driver I set up 2 cones at a distance, and the driver will start just parking in and out of each cone, back and forth, park forwards, park backwards, park forwards, park backwards. And as they start getting better and start not hitting cones, tighten it up. Have them running routes, even if there's not a manipulator on the robot, a thing to move the game pieces. You can start running the route, park at scoring station A, park at game piece collection, just running back and forth. You can start running your maneuvers, just hit repetitions on your how to avoid a robot, do your little juke thing. So start putting these drills together, right? As you're going through the simulation, start putting these together. You want to be quick, but do it. Start running the routes with people playing defense, interference, that's stuff I was just talking about. I think I actually kind of repeated myself like 3 times during this section. As I was saying, speed comes with time. Clean repetitions, more important than trying to go fast right off the bat. Consistent clean repetitions become muscle memory. You become faster with practice. One thing I really have to do with my driver, Davon, he's so quick to just go full throttle on the thing. I have to yell at him to make sure he's going slow when he's getting used to the routes, the repetitions, because he'll just full throttle all the time. So you got to make sure when they're first starting out with the new robot, slow, run repetitions, don't try and go fast. So after you have the clean repetitions, start ending all the interference. Yeah, I've repeated myself like 3 times. All right, so we start getting into competitions at this point. End of the season, end of the season, competition time. So, morale. You really have to keep your drivers in high spirits, right? So if you're the coach, you're the mentor, whatever, the kids aren't going to perform as well when they're down on themselves, right? So they have a bad match, they come back, they're... What?
Sorry, I had some folks that came in late and they wanted me to come into your...
Okay.
So I brought them some dishes.
Students will get down on themselves, it happens. We all have bad matches, we all have bad days. It's important to remind them that it's one match, right? It happens. Get used to it. Get over yourself. It's gonna get better. Just keep performing like you've been practicing. Stick to the basics. We'll be fine. Keep their morale up. Keep their spirits up. Reviewing matches as a coach, mentor, you gotta discuss pros and cons, right? That's a normal thing. If they did something wrong, point it out first, but always end on a high note. Think of something that they did really well during the match. Because that's the thing that sticks in their mind. It's the last thing you told them. If they get nervous before a match, we've all seen Davon. He's just over there like, you got to come over and you got to find something with your students. High five, a little handshake, whatever, do a little dance. Remind them just to stay loose. It's not a big deal. Don't get nervous. This is for education. This isn't for like millions of dollars. You got to be their support system. If they come off the field and they're really bad, that team was just really rude, really not helpful at all. Let them get that. And then just remind them, hey, we're not playing with them anymore. It's not a big deal. If you're not coaching on the field, like I won't be, you got to be the biggest support system, right? You got to make sure your entire team is cheering for them. You got to make sure they can hear the team, make sure they can hear you while you're up in the stands. Use your voice. Student health, right? Make sure they stay hydrated. That's something that I, as a driver, always forgot. Drink water. It's important. Stay hydrated. Make sure your drivers have time to eat, right? 'Cause sometimes the drivers are also the pit crew. Depends on the team. But make sure that they take time out of their other responsibilities to go and get something to eat. It's super important. Hungry doesn't translate to performance. Sleep. Make sure they sleep. I know you can't control that. We tend to stay up till 3 a.m. playing Smash Brothers. I get it. try and get sleep, right? Do some stretches. I know this isn't a super physical thing, right? We're not out there running into each other with pads on, right? But it's important to just keep your body loose because it helps. There's weird stuff that happens with biology. It helps keep your mind loose too, right? Trust your students. Kids are naturally more creative than adults. You really have to trust them. Sometimes they make up a strategy that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let them have a go at it, right? So maybe it won't make sense, but if it works out, then hey, it's better than what you got. But if you don't let them try it and you keep going with what you've been doing, it just doesn't work as well, they're not going to trust you, right? You got to trust them for them to trust you. It's something a lot of adults struggle with. So, as I kind of said at the start of this was mostly aimed at people who want to be a coach, be a mentor of a drive team. But the basics of it, the too long didn't read, is carefully selected and well-practiced drive team will carry an entire robot, right? Sometimes underperforming robots can be driven into eliminations. I've seen it happen a couple times. I've seen it in 2012. There was a robot that was literally just a big triangle, and they couldn't shoot a basketball at all. But they were able to ram the bridge, back up. The bridge would kind of teeter down. They were able to drive up on it. They could play crazy defense. Actually, they're here today, 40-83. Your team.
Yes.
You guys were crazy in 2012. You couldn't do anything physically, but you could outplay half the teams there because your drive team was excellent. Keep up the physical and mental health, otherwise no performance. Now this is just a starting point for teams that want to restructure their drive team or are new. Every team works a little bit differently, so take points from this, make adjustments on your own, whatever you need. It's all catered to your team. It's not this way or that way, right?
I know.
Well, we're done now.
We're done.
Well, okay. All that. Okay, all right, sorry.
But if you'd like paperwork,
Hold on, what?
if you'd like paperwork,
Well, yeah, well, come on and talk to, you guys go ahead and talk to us.
I can talk to you.
Okay, there you
Um,
go. Go on, he'll talk to you.
So
He likes talking.
I just wanted to point out that our team is always willing to help anybody that requests it, wants it. I personally can be contacted there. I'm only here on weekends. I live in Charlotte, but contact me. I'm here on weekends. You guys can come to us. We can help you out, whatever you want. We typically have about half the field set up in our room towards the end of the build season. If you contact us ahead of time, we'll be willing to let people come in and kind of practice with us. That's all I got.